Pasquale Paoli. The Republic France tried to erase. Corsica is a mountainous island in the Mediterranean. It lies west of Italy and southeast of France. Today, it belongs to France. But at the beginning of the 18th century, it belonged, at least officially, to the Republic of Genoa, a powerful Italian maritime state. Genoa had claimed Corsica for centuries. It controlled the main ports, collected taxes, and placed officials in the coastal cities. But beyond those cities, its power was fragile. The interior belonged to mountain villages, local clans and armed families who did not consider Genoese authority legitimate. For years, the island remained tense. Then Genoa demanded another tax. And in 1729, Corsica exploded. A local protest became an armed uprising. Genoese officials were attacked. Villages refused to pay. Rebels seized territory. The conflict did not end in weeks. It continued for decades. Genoa could not defeat the Corsicans alone, so it called foreign armies onto the island. Imperial troops intervened first. French soldiers followed later. Each time the rebellion appeared crushed, it returned. In 1735, a Corsican assembly declared the island independent from Genoa. The declaration changed little on the battlefield. Genoa still held fortified ports. Foreign troops still arrived. Corsican leaders were killed, defeated, or forced into exile. But the idea of independence survived. One of the exiled rebel leaders was Giacinto Paoli. With him went his young son. Pasquale. Pasquale Paoli grew up in Naples, far from the island his father had fought for. He studied military affairs and served in the Neapolitan army. He learned how disciplined forces moved, how governments survived, and why rebellions usually failed. They could destroy an administration. They could ambush soldiers. They could control mountains. But unless they created courts, taxes, laws, and an army, they remained rebels. In 1755, Corsican leaders asked Paoli to return. He was 30 years old. When he reached the island, Corsica was still divided. Genoa held several important coastal strongholds. Corsican factions controlled most of the interior, but frequently fought among themselves. Paoli was elected general of the Corsican nation. The title sounded military. His ambition was much larger. He was not planning another temporary revolt. He intended to build a state. Paoli established his government at Corte, an inland fortress surrounded by mountains. From there, he created courts, reorganized taxation, and formed a national administration. He raised an army. He minted Corsican coins. He established a printing press. He founded a university. He adopted a constitution declaring that authority belonged to the Corsican nation. The island now had two governments. Genoa still claimed legal ownership. Paoli controlled most of the land. Along the coast, Genoese flags flew above fortified cities. Beyond their walls, Paoli's republic was taking shape. Paoli understood that this situation could not continue forever. As long as Genoa controlled the ports, it could bring in soldiers and supplies. So the Corsicans built a small fleet and established a new port at l'Île Rousse to compete with Genoese-controlled Calvi. Corsican forces tightened their grip on the island. In 1767, they even captured Capraia, a small Genoese island north of Corsica. For Genoa, the message was clear. It was losing the war. But Paoli had another problem. A republic could survive in the mountains. It could not survive alone in Europe. Paoli needed international support. He presented Corsica as more than a remote rebellion. He wanted philosophers, politicians, and foreign governments to see it as a nation fighting tyranny. The strategy worked. The Scottish writer James Boswell travelled to Corsica and met Paoli. His published account transformed the Corsican leader into a European celebrity. Paoli was described as an Enlightenment patriot, a soldier who carried a constitution instead of a crown. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was invited to consider a political plan for the island. Across Europe, intellectuals praised Corsican liberty. But admiration was cheap. Paoli needed warships, weapons, and diplomatic recognition. Europe gave him books and applause. Then Genoa made its final move. It invited France to take the island. In May 1768, Genoa and the Kingdom of France signed the Treaty of Versailles. The agreement was presented as a financial arrangement. France had spent enormous sums helping Genoa hold Corsican territory. Genoa transferred its rights over the island as security for its debts. In theory, Genoa might recover Corsica by repaying France. In reality, it could not. The treaty allowed two foreign governments to decide the fate of an island that neither of them actually controlled. Genoa had not conquered Paoli. It had transferred the war to one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe. Cambridge University Press and Assessment. French troops were already present in several coastal positions. Now they advanced inland. This was no longer a war between Corsica and the declining Republic of Genoa. It was a war between Paoli's unrecognized republic and the army of King Louis XV. France expected a quick occupation. Paoli refused to surrender. He declared that Genoa had no right to give away a country it no longer possessed. Corsican fighters blocked roads, attacked detachments, and used the mountains to slow the French advance. In October 1768, near Borgo, Paoli's forces surrounded and defeated a French force. For a moment, the impossible seemed possible. The Corsicans had beaten a royal army. The victory spread panic through the French command and hope across the island. But France did not withdraw. It sent reinforcements, more soldiers, more artillery, more money. Paoli had won a battle. France could afford to lose one. Corsica could not. In the spring of 1769, the French began their decisive campaign. Their forces pushed through the island's northeast, separating Corsican units and driving them toward the Golo River. The critical point was Ponte Novu, a stone bridge in a narrow valley. Paoli's men attempted to regroup there. Then everything collapsed. French troops attacked. Corsican units became trapped near the crossing. Gunfire swept the road. Men trying to retreat found the bridge blocked. Others were caught between French forces and Corsican positions, whose defenders may not have recognized them in the chaos. The battle became a massacre. By May 1769, organized Corsican resistance was broken. Paoli escaped through the mountains and reached the coast. From there, he fled to Britain. His republic was gone. French troops occupied Corsica. Genoa never returned. 3 months after the defeat, a child was born in Ajaccio, Napoleon Bonaparte. His family had supported Paoli's resistance before accepting the new French government. Napoleon would grow up as a French subject. But as a young man, he did not think of France as his natural homeland. He admired Paoli. He wrote about Corsican liberty. He condemned the men who had helped France take the island. To Napoleon, Paoli was not merely a politician. He was the man his generation had failed to become. While Napoleon studied in French military schools, Paoli lived in London. The British government gave him a pension. Writers, politicians, and aristocrats welcomed him into their circles. He had lost his country, but gained a legend. For 20 years, he waited. Then the French monarchy began to collapse. In 1789, revolution broke out in Paris. The government that had conquered Corsica now spoke of liberty, popular sovereignty, and the rights of nations. Corsica was formally integrated into the new French political system, and political exiles were allowed to return. In 1790, Paoli came home. He was welcomed by crowds. Revolutionary France treated him as a hero. He became president of Corsica's departmental government and commander of its National Guard. For the moment, Paoli accepted the new order. And among the young men celebrating his return was Napoleon Bonaparte. But the alliance was unstable. Paoli was now an old revolutionary. Napoleon was a young officer desperate for action and advancement. Paoli believed Corsican interests had to come first. Napoleon was beginning to see that the French Revolution offered something Corsica never could: a vast army, a national stage, a path to power. The final break came in 1793. Revolutionary France was at war with much of Europe. French authorities ordered an expedition against the Kingdom of Sardinia. Napoleon joined an attack on the island of La Maddalena. The operation failed. Orders were confused. Troops refused to continue. The force withdrew in humiliation. Napoleon suspected that Paoli's allies had deliberately sabotaged the expedition. Paoli's enemies in Paris accused him of treason. The National Convention ordered his arrest. Paoli refused to obey. He called his supporters together and prepared armed resistance. Corsica split again. This time, the war was not Corsicans against Genoa. It was Corsicans against Corsicans. Paoli's supporters denounced the Bonaparte family as agents of revolutionary France. Napoleon was briefly detained. The Bonaparte home was attacked. In June 1793, the family fled the island by sea. Napoleon left Corsica as a refugee. He would never again make Corsican independence his cause. Paoli had defeated Napoleon politically, but he still faced France, so he turned to Britain. The British wanted Corsica as a naval base in the Mediterranean. Paoli wanted British weapons and protection. Their interests appeared to match. British forces attacked French-held ports with Corsican support. By 1794, the French had been driven from most of the island. Paoli had removed France from Corsica. For the second time in his life, he appeared to have won. But the victory contained a trap. Corsica became the Anglo-Corsican kingdom, united with the British crown. King George III became sovereign. A British viceroy, Sir Gilbert Elliot, received executive authority. Paoli's second attempt to free the island had lasted even less time than the first. Paoli never returned. He died in London in 1807. By then, the young Corsican officer who had once worshipped him had become Emperor Napoleon I. Napoleon had chosen France and gained an empire. Paoli had chosen Corsica and lost it twice. But his defeat was not meaningless. For 14 years, his republic had governed most of the island. It had written laws, created institutions, raised an army, minted money, educated students, and forced Genoa to admit that it could no longer rule. For a brief moment, in the mountains between Genoese fortresses and advancing French armies, Corsica was not a possession. It was a republic, and Pasquale Paoli was its leader.